Coming up on A Girl and a Gun, we look at the Queen's Birthdays honours list for this year. We discuss Ben Hall, rival film productions, and we say farewell to Rik Mayall, one of the young ones.
A Girl and a Gun, episode 38, recorded on 12 June 2014. Queen honors Ben Hall.
All you need to make a movie is a girl and a gun. Come along and join the party. I was there at the sun.
Hello, welcome to A Girl and a Gun, the show for filmmakers and content creators. I am Phil Moore, and today on the couch I'm joined by Nick Blazinski. G'day, Nick.
Hi, Phil. Thanks for having me on again.
We wanted you especially for this episode because
Yeah.
of the topic coming up later, a couple of topics in fact, that you
Okay.
can certainly speak to. Okay? And we're going to go right into the breaking news of this week. So first up, we've just had the Queen birthday honours list announced.
That's right.
And top of the list here is veteran writer Eleanor Whitcomb. And if we have a look at the shot here, which is on, we got this from Arts Hub, there's a shot of Eleanor Whitcomb from the Australian Woman's Weekly from 1950 when she was 25 years old. That's what the
Yes.
caption says.
Well, she's aged very well as well, because she looks exactly the same today. I happen to know Eleanor.
Do you?
Yes, she's been writing a book on the great Daisy Bates, the great Australian
yes.
feminist and anthropologist, for about the last 20 years. And so we're still waiting to see that, Eleanor, and good luck.
Well, she has written other stuff that has gotten out there and players, etc. So she's there. Also notable is Paul Grabowski,
Yes,
jazz musician
indeed.
and entrepreneur, and he got the General Division Order of Australia. He is a composer for films and television. He's also been involved in the administrations of the Australia Council, all sorts of things. So he,
Yeah, it's worthy.
very worthy. He's been
Yeah.
doing this for a very, very long time. Adelaide Festival, of course, he's
Yeah.
been chairman of Queensland Music Festival, that kind of thing. We had a picture there of Paul, I think, did we?
We did,
So we
yes.
had a picture of Paul Grabowski there, looking very excited.
Yes, absolutely. Animated, as he always does.
Animated. Also, we've got Sandra Levy, who has been CEO of the AFTRS, Australian Film and
Yes.
Television Radio School, and she's been the head at ABC for 10 years, from
Yes, that's
1986 to 1990 roughly.
Yeah.
Again, Sandra Levy, one of the top producers.
Yes, she's really been round the traps.
Exactly.
on
I know her from
everything.
way back when in my acting
Yes.
days when she was at the ABC.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I crossed with her too when we were doing docos for the ABC.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And there are others. Another notable one, I don't know, Virginia Halsiger. Do you know Virginia at all?
Not at all, no.
For significant services to the community, particularly as an advocate for women's rights and gender equality to the media. So, on you, Virginia. I don't know you personally, though, and what you've done. John Kirby. Do you know John Kirby? His father started Village Roadshow.
Oh,
And
okay.
he's been involved with the Jigsaw Foundation, Life Saving. So this is mainly for charitable work, and he's got
Yeah,
some
yeah.
fingers also in the arts. These are all people from the arts industry and screen
Yeah,
industry
yeah.
that have received the awards.
Yeah.
Some other interesting news that come up this week. A young filmmaker has started a Kickstarter campaign to raise $75,000 to do a 30-minute short version of the Ben Hall story, The Legend of Ben Hall. So they're trying to crowdfund to do this, and the Kickstarter campaign is quite, quite well advanced. They're currently up to $19,285. They've got 25 days to go. If you don't know anything about Ben Hall, we actually have a little clip here from the old TV series. Do you remember the TV series?
Yes,
70s?
in the 70s. It was slightly before my time, but yes, I have seen it retrospectively.
Let's have a look at, we've got the opening titles of that old 1970s Ben Hall TV series. Let's have a look at that now. So this was Australia's introduction as a entertainment of Ben Hall, that series.
Yes.
And I remember watching that back in the day.
Yeah.
This new film, an emotionally charged, action-packed 30-minute film about the last days of the infamous Australian bushranger outlaw Ben Hall. Now I bring this up because you know a little bit about Ben Hall.
I do, Phil. I actually wrote a book about Ben Hall. It was published 9 years ago now, already, amazingly, and it was called You'll Never Take Me Alive.
Right. This is that was a bit about the video from the Kickstarter campaign.
Yeah.
We've got the photo. There's the book. So that's
Yep.
the book that you wrote, You'll Never Take Me Alive, which
Yeah.
is still available on ABC and Goodreads and other places.
Absolutely. No, it's, yes, I wrote it 10 years ago. I was the first person to really go into the Hall legend with any kind of depth. There'd been various romantic fictions written prior to that. There was the TV series, which actually was not based on his life, or very, very loosely indeed. It was more a vehicle that he was a bushranger, and it was a vehicle for all sorts of adventures. But what I did was go back to Forbes, go back to the source, and I knew the Hall family. Ben Hall Jr. was in his 80s at that time and had a very good grasp of the Hall legend.
This is the son of the man himself.
He was the great-grandson.
Great-grandson,
Yeah,
okay.
because Ben Hall was actually died in the 1850s, so
Junior,
it was
junior,
quite
junior.
Yeah, so he was junior. But the thing was, I actually was the first person to discover how Ben Hall died, and I can tell you, a 30-minute film about his last days I'm not sure it would do it justice.
Well-
far less the rest of the legend.
Well, writer, director, producer Matthew Holmes has a bit of experience in period drama. He's done a film before called Twin Rivers, which was a period piece. Low budget film, but
Yeah.
it's been shown on Foxtel, etc. And he's got some good people involved here. His production crew includes the production designer who's worked on the Snowy River films from
Yeah.
way back, Far Lap. Notably here, we've got executive producer, historical consultant Peter Bradley, who is one of the descendants of Ben Hall. Have you
Yes.
come across Peter in your travels?
Not personally, but I know of him, and he's written a book that purports to be the true version of Ben Hall. I think I would be interested to see how that actually pans out when it comes to fruition, if it comes to fruition. As I say, my feeling is to do the whole legend justice, you'd need a lot more than $75,000. It's an epic film. It really is a film that's begging to be made. When I wrote the book, I really tried to tease the whole thing out in a screenplay kind of format. I did historical fiction. And it is a great story. It is far more compelling personal tale than Ned Kelly's ever was. Ben Hall was the original and the greatest bushranger in Australian history. Ned Kelly was in awe of Hall. He actually rode through the streets of Wangaratta shouting, "Hurrah for Ben Hall." He copied him. When he took over the town and held everyone hostage and put a party on, but shortly before he died, that was a direct copy of what Ben Hall did.
Well, okay. They're wanting to raise $75,000 to do a 30-minute short of the last days of Ben Hall, but they plan to make a full feature-length version, and he claims he's written this already. And the Kickstarter campaign is nicely, the photographs, we can have a look at some while I talk here. They've got a young actor here, Jack Martin, who looks very much like Ben Hall.
It is up to our generation to carry his legacy.
So that's the pitch campaign from the Kickstarter. They're looking at the old photo. If you scroll down there, just stop the video and scroll down a bit, you'll see some of Jack Martin, their actor, who's going to play Ben. There he is on the poster image. You know, so it's all very well presented, and they plan to make the feature version. But $75,000 even to do a 30-minute climactic sequence. Do you think that's enough money to do it in?
It is very, very pricey to do it. I mean, the Ben Hall, the final climactic sequences involve quite a number of police, Ben Hall himself, and I think, you know, to give it the full Monty, to give it justice, I think they would have to be getting a lot of favours to do it for that.
Well, I'm
amount of
assuming,
money.
yes, they've got some experienced people on board, but I'm
Yeah.
assuming they're all doing it for nothing in the
Would
hope
have
that they'll
to
be
be.
involved in the feature project.
Indeed. I can see that they're trying to make it as debate, but in a sense, I would question taking the climactic scene out of the film, showing it to everyone, and then trying to go back and then make a feature after. People, I mean, a financier could turn around and say, well, you've already taken the best cut out of the meat. Why do we want to go back and do
Well, the argument is, you know, as you
Yeah.
said, the story leading up to that is a great
Oh,
story.
the story is, I mean, and there's great heroes and villains. I mean, Ben
Yeah.
Hall became a bushranger, for those who've never heard the story, because the police killed all these cattle and burned down his farm. They thought he was a bushranger. They accused him of being a bushranger, even though he wasn't. And they have this great villain Pottinger, who was a disgraced English gentleman.
Who we saw in the
In the brief titles.
Yeah.
And he's a fantastic villain. And he decided to cast Ben Hall as a bushranger, even though he wasn't. And when he burned down the farm, Ben Hall memorably said, "I might as well have the game as the blame." And
Yeah.
that was his whole raison d'etre for going into it, which was much stronger than Kelly's. Apparently, Kelly said that a policeman kissed his sister, and that's the kick-started
reason for it.
this entire legend. Whereas Ben Hall had slightly more justification, and of course, what do you call it? My feeling is that please make a full-blooded feature. It's what it deserves.
Well, that's what these guys are trying to do, so more power to them. I am a bit ambivalent about 75,000 being able to do what they want, but if everyone's working for nothing, and he's done this kind of stuff before, and they've got people that know what they're doing,
Yeah.
maybe. But I know this is not the only Ben Hall project on
No,
the table.
there isn't one. My book has been optioned as well.
Exactly, so there's at least one other.
Yeah, and apparently they're along the way to basically getting the money to make the film as well. So I'm not sure if they are quite as prominent on social media. Maybe they're just getting along with the job of finding the money. But I know that that's something that is in the offing, and it's a very good script. I've read it.
Well, good luck to these guys anyway. Let's see. Look, if Matthew pulls this off and it turns out well, maybe and yours takes off, maybe why have two? Maybe we end up with two Ben Hall films, or maybe you end up collaborating together somehow.
Yeah.
To make the one great Ben Hall film, because it will take a lot of money to do it right.
Indeed it would.
Yeah. Okay, moving right along. We've actually got, this is not so much a film-related story, but sort of tech, and it's of interest to our audience. A couple of weeks ago, Apple bought Beats,
Yeah.
which is Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine's company that do the headphones, and they have the online service. For $3 billion, which by today's standards in the tech world is actually pretty cheap.
Yes, given that.
With a $2.6 billion in cash up front and $400 million in stock. So Dr. Dre almost stymied the whole deal when he announced it too early, with lots of swearing and things, in the recording studio.
Yeah.
He almost blew the whole thing, unfortunately. But it's happened. But the thing I wanted to talk about, in fact, was that as a direct result of this, Apple have now come out and said they're going to change the 3.5 mil connector, so that headphones into the iPhone 5 and the future generation iPads are going to use the Thunderbolt connector.
Right.
Direct connecting into the connector. And there are good technical reasons for this. It means you've got control, you can get phantom power, apps can control the headphones directly, all that kind of thing.
But also very good commercial reasons, and they're slightly more suspect in my opinion.
It will lock you into, if you're going to buy those sort of things, you're locked into that.
Yeah,
You buy Beats headphones with that connected, they won't fit into anything else.
And I
Exactly.
think, to be honest, Apple need to really watch their step. They've created a very good product, but if you notice the latest generation of, say, their iPad or their laptops, they've taken out the DVD player, they've taken out the hard drive, and you buy these things separately. So you pay more for something, and then you have to buy the add-ons. And I have to say, as someone who loves Apple, I'm finding reasons to start thinking about alternatives. And I think this kind of, well, now we've got you, you're going to buy our headphones, and they're the only ones we can buy, and this is going to go with that. It's trying to kind of corner the market by forcing you into a corner.
Look, I've got an Apple laptop on lap right now. I love the technology, and I
Yeah.
do have an iPad, etc.
Yeah.
But they do have this walled garden
Yes.
scenario where if you're in the Apple universe, no worries. But if you're trying to get this to work with PCs or Android phones or tablets or whatever else, they all have their own solutions. So Apple are trying to build their own little mini universe, and
That's
they've
right.
done that very well. This is another cog in that.
That's
scheme,
right.
yeah.
And I think, though, that's the thing about technology. It needs to all talk to each other to make it
And
effective.
headphones is like, it's a generic product pretty much. You know,
Yes.
this is not necessarily, you have to have these headphones for the Apple to work. It's like they should be able to plug into anything that produces
I think
music.
so. I think so. And I think in the end of the day, people will either want to be in that walled garden or they want to be outside it altogether. And as I say, price is also a barrier. If they think, well, we've got the monopoly on this new plug, and therefore the cost of the headphones go up, people maybe say, you know what, do I really need that?
Well, they're expensive as it is. But the
Yeah.
thing that actually annoyed me the most about the prospect of this happening is, if I had an iPhone, and I travelled, I got a long journey to get here during the day, and I'm listening, I don't have an iPhone, I got an Android phone, but if I did, I'm listening to music or podcasts in the car, and while I'm listening to that out of the phone phono jack, I've got it plugged into the power. With this new Thunderbolt connection, you can't do both.
Yeah.
You either listen to your music or you have it plugged into power, and it's draining your battery if you're listening to music.
Yeah, and
Which is like
exactly.
You know, you can't do, which is silly. You can't do both at the same time.
And surprisingly, despite all the fantastic technology we've got, battery power remains a huge issue.
It does.
I mean, we can fly to Mars, but we can't make a battery that can run all day on a laptop and do all the things we need it to do. So there are, as I say, I think a little way to go before we get technology to work as we want it.
The great next revolution is battery power, especially for electric cars and things that last a long
Absolutely.
time.
I mean, and we should be able to develop something that doesn't need to be recharged every 5 or 6 hours.
Sad news this week, Rik Mayall.
Ah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Rik Mayall, I know
gutting.
him best from the Young Ones, but he's done movies and other stuff since then. In fact, we've got a little bit of the Young Ones that we can show you. For those who don't know Rik Mayall, here's Rik at his best.
Neil! Orange Phil! If only I could see you again!
Hello, Rick. Hello, Rick. Hello, Rick.
Help! Michael! Vivian! Neil's come back from the grave as zombies!
Okay.
Well, I finished the new car competition.
That's someone's put together that in honour of Rik. There's a whole lot of clips
Yes,
from the Young Ones
indeed.
there. Died at the age of 57, 56.
Yes.
The
Way too young.
Cause of death is unknown at this stage, but it's probably complications based on the fact that he had epilepsy from an accident that he'd suffered
That's right, I
earlier.
believe so. But again, I look at a massive tragedy, and I have to say, when I heard that news, I was sitting in an office of Australians, full of Australian people, and when the news suddenly appeared on Sydney Morning Herald, there was this terrible eyeing and ohing around the office, and people said, "Oh my God!" And the world just seemed a little grayer and a little darker, and the light dimmed, and I just thought, "Oh, another good one gone. Why do all the good ones die? We're left with all the crap people."
And not just as a performer, as we saw, but also a great writer, comedic
Oh,
writer.
absolutely. Look, I was, funny enough, when the Young Ones came out in Britain originally, it was about 1981, and I think I was my first year as a student, and I just remember the huge impact when it came out. I mean, this was absurdist comedy following on
It's
from...
anarchic comedy.
Exactly, sort of following on from Monty Python, you know, that kind of left-wing student thing. And it was very much Thatcher's era. And Rik was railing against the machine. You know, they were all living in squalid conditions, as I was. And I always have a great affinity. And just seeing those clips come back over the last few days, it's sort of, you sort of felt your mortality, you know. That was, God almighty, that was 30 odd years ago now. And
it's still a great series. If you can get,
Oh, yeah.
And you can get them on DVD, the Young Ones. Let's have a look at the website again. There's a photo of all the four of the Young Ones there, the key cast from that. And I love the quote here from Adrian Edmondson, one of his fellow cast members from that. There were times when Rik and I were writing together when we almost died laughing. They were some of the most carefree, stupid days I ever had, and I feel privileged to have shared them with him. And now he's died for real, without me. Selfish bastard.
Oh, that, and spoken just like he would, you know, Adrian Edmondson.
Which is the one in the red hair there.
Yes, absolutely, the punk.
Yes.
Yes, or the would-be punk. Yes, and as I say, that was a classic series. It was, you know, the BBC at its very best, producing cutting-edge comedy, and he also went on to other great things like Alan Bastard. Again, the Thatcher era conservative MP who didn't give a shit about anyone.
Blackadder, The New Statesman, Bottom, I love that series.
Yeah.
Drop Dead Fred, which is one of the movies he did, of course, and Guest House Paradiso. But best remembered for those early shows like Young Ones and Blackadder.
I mean, that's what made him, and he actually was one of the creators of that. As a young man in his early 20s, to just burst through and cut through in a way that will never be forgotten. You know, that's an incredible testimony. And I think if you ever were a young one, You know, what you call it. You'll never be forgotten, because that was one of the crowning achievements, I think, of the modern comedy era.
It is. After Monty Python, that series.
Absolutely, was the next big burst through. It just was another generation. The Monty Python was the 60s, the psychedelic imagery, whereas the Young Ones was punk.
Yeah.
It was the time. You know, everyone was a radical.
And I love the fact that on the show, if you get the DVDs, they had guest punk bands on the show. They had The Damned on the show.
Absolutely, and that's another reason why we watched it, because that was the music of the time, and it very much fitted in with the fact that we were all against Thatcher, we were against racism, we were against the man, and it was a different era. It was a political era when, in Britain especially, people were basically fighting against what we saw as a very much a kind of authoritarian power in Margaret Thatcher.
Anarchic political
and as I say, Tony Abbott was obviously watching the Young Ones as well and learning not from the Young Ones but from Thatcher.
He unfortunately learned the wrong lesson.
Yeah, and he's now trying to replicate the very same thing in Australia, and I hope we respond with something as powerful as the Young Ones.
There, we need an Australian version of the Young Ones these days. So, Valet to Rik Mayall. We're going to finish up today with Pick My Brain. Pick My Brain. And we have a couple of Pick My Brain questions.
I recently just went and saw Bad Neighbour, and basically just want to know how they produce fight scenes and make it look like it's so real.
Okay. How do they produce fight scenes and make it look so real?
Well, as we are always at pains to tell our students, there's a number of techniques. First of all, it's the intercutting and the choreographing of a sequence. What I always say to my students is, you don't just shoot a piece of drama from one angle or one shot size. You do it multiple times. So when you've got those physical moves, basically you can cut them together, you can shorten the action, and you can make it look, because part of it is a trick. They're not really punching each other, but you need to make it look as though that. Also, there's the sound. Obviously, sound effects are very important, and music as well, and that all helps to sort of disguise the moment. And you know,
to show kind of what you're talking about here, we've got a little clip from Born Identity. So here's one of the ultimate fight scenes. We won't show the whole thing, but a bit of it now.
What is it? Something wrong?
So we can see here, fast cutting, lots of short segments that they've put together to make it look like a dynamic fight sequence. This is fist fighting, gunplay, stunts, coming through that glass window after all. The punching, the sound effects.
Also point of view shots, very important,
shots,
because
the moving camera, the whip pans, all of that.
Exactly, handheld camera, which suggests that the camera is in the fight itself. It positions you in the middle of the action.
And you notice all of these are really quick shots.
Yeah.
Apart from the fact that fast editing adds dynamism to you know, the moment, you shoot that in tiny little segments.
That's
very
right.
safely. The actors have rehearsed that for weeks beforehand. They know exactly what all the moves are. They go through all of those moves, and there may be actual impact. There may be actual
absolutely, there
contact
is.
in
There
all of
is.
this.
You do make contact, and you do sometimes hear the slap. But actors are sort of professional enough to keep going. And also the other thing that works is little cutaways. You saw shots when someone was kicking at someone, and there was a rolling across the floor. So you try to shoot little little cutaways that you can just cut into the action. And then wherever, if it looks a bit saggy here or there, you can always put in those quick, tiny little bits of cutaway footage. And really, in the end, it's a kind of confection of all of those techniques put together.
And the challenge is with a sequence like that, and the same is true with a major visual effects or action sequence of any kind, it looks chaotic.
Yeah.
But it's very precisely planned.
Oh, absolutely.
The choreography and even the way it's shot, even in that, which is mad camera work, very carefully planned.
But it is shot from multiple angles and with multiple shot sizes. That's what I always say. With good drama, when you see those beautifully cut sequences in movies where, you know, something happens, someone crosses a room, and it happens in something that would take 20 seconds happens in 4 seconds. It's really that intercutting of action shot from multiple angles and multiple shot sizes, because it enables the editor to make everything sort of smooth and happen
and the challenge is,
effortlessly.
if you see some movies, I won't mention titles, which do a fight sequence like that, but it's really confusing about where the actors are, what's happening, who's hitting who. it can be very easily mishandled.
It is.
Sometimes.
And that, again, that's the beauty of the master shot. Because again, ultimately, if you do get to that moment where you go, hang on a minute, there's so many punches being thrown and so much glass has fallen on the floor, where are we? That high angle shot or a point of view shot from behind the door or something, you can't underestimate the value of that just to reposition the geography, especially if it happens over 2 or 3 rooms, as often happens. People go from one room to the other, continuing their fight. Sometimes you just need a mini breather.
On that, I love it actually when you get a film that just stands back and watches it, and look at some of the martial arts films like Jackie Chan, Bruce Lee, where they're just so good and they can just keep on going. Just sit back and watch it like a Fred Astaire dance routine. One shot, one. You know,
and of course,
it all happens from the performance.
And of course, the trick there is when you have those. I mean, 2 people are moving in unison, and it's almost a ballet of acting. But also remember, you can speed it up, and at any time you can suddenly make it look faster. And so, seeing 4 seconds of that speeded up because their arms and legs are moving, it has a sort of slightly. Has that dance quality almost to it, and that lends itself to the wides.
We won't talk much more about this, but I remember one film that I did, for example, where we had the actress picked up a brick and whacked the guy in the head. And it's a dangerous stunt. It's a real brick. We shot the thing in reverse. And then I sped it up in post to look like it him in the head. Add the sound effect. Bang.
Exactly, and it's all about illusion. I think that's what people have got to realise, and it's keeping those shots short and sharp.
Okay, so there's a lot to it. That's how you do a fight sequence. A lot of planning and a lot of rehearsal, basically. We have another Pick My Brain question. Let's have a listen to that one.
And I would like to know how to go about making a video, producing a video, doing the interviews with people that I need to do.
How to make and produce a video, in particular interviews. That's a big question.
It is indeed. And again, it goes back to the fundamentals of filmmaking. And what, I guess, the lesson we try to sort of constantly put on the people that we train is that really it's the pre-production, the preparation that makes the shooting easier, which makes the post-production easier. At the end of the day, if it's a commercial production that you're on, and ultimately every cent counts, as it normally does, doing the pre-production, the stuff that doesn't cost money, you don't have equipment out, you don't have cameramen on standby, you need to be exactly sure of what you're doing, what questions you're asking, and what's the objective of the film that you're making.
So even if it's documentary, you still have a script of some description.
Always.
There's scheduling, there's shot listing, there's planning, all of that stuff. So when you do get into there to do the interview...
Exactly, you know what you're getting. So for example, I often write the documentary script. I research it thoroughly and I know what I want to get out of it. I know my point of view. I'm not just going in there as on a fishing expedition. I know what I'm trying to get. And I write my script, so I actually even put the words into the mouth of the person. So in an ideal world, what would they say? And I try to guide my questions to get the answers that I want. And in doing so, I might not get everything I want, but at least if I'm covering the main points that I wanted to get, if I get anything else, it's a bonus. And then I have the beautiful problem of how I get so much good material into one interview. That's a nice problem to have, but you need to know what it is that what points do they need to make.
What you're looking for, what the story you're trying to tell.
Exactly, you need to be very clear about that. And then when you go out, you don't end up shooting 40-minute interviews and looking for the story afterwards. That's where it goes wrong mostly, because...
And also, a lot of people make the mistake early on of, this is a regular conversation, which is good, but they talk over the interview subject, and they focus, it's about them. So and you've got to try to ask the question and let them answer it, listen and respond to that. And if you've got your list of questions, great.
You can keep pushing them towards it, because sometimes people, they don't know what you're trying to get out of them. You've said, I want to interview you. They don't know what you've got in your mind. So also, pre-interviewing people also helps. Talking to them on the phone. I know you've written a book about Ben Hall. I'm very interested in X, Y, and Z, and auto-suggesting what it is that you might like to talk about and what you might like to hear. That does help a lot.
We've both been on both sides of this as people that make a doco, you in particular, that kind of thing. And as you mentioned with the book, being the subject of the interview.
Yes.
You know, for that kind of thing.
Exactly. So it is that really that planning and that very as close as you can analysis to what it is I'm trying to end up with. And the more you do at the beginning, the less difficult it will be when you come to your post-production phase, because
You won't have
exactly you won't have
of
a
this
ton of
footage.
material trying to make. I mean, and some of the shooting ratios now are ridiculous. When I started back 30 years ago, you got a 5 to 6 to 1 ratio. In other words, for every minute you recorded, you might shoot six of rushes.
yeah.
Now it's up to 1 to 30 to 40.
Yeah.
And that's an enormous amount of
just
material
because
to handle.
you can shoot lots on digital
No.
cameras doesn't mean you should.
No, very much the opposite. You
Yes.
the less you end up with, the better the project you're going to end up with, because you're targeting what you're doing. And in post-production, of course, you may end up with things may go slightly different to your plan. So you have to kind of almost go back and start to remake the film again once you've shot it. You may end up with a lot of better things. Things happen unexpectedly. You get better things than you
Well, that's the
expect.
challenge with docos. Sometimes
Yes.
you start out expecting one thing and a
Exactly.
different story emerges.
And I know that only too well, just having made a film series myself. We ended up with so many better things than we thought we were going to end up with. And then we had to really rethink how we made
But
the film.
this is a huge subject, a big question.
It
So
is.
If you really want to learn how to do that, go to a film school. Either come to CIFA, where we make the show, or any other decent film school.
Yep.
You will learn and spend 6 months to a year learning that craft at least, basically.
And it is a craft.
It is. That's what film schools are for. Thank you very Nick for that, for joining us today.
You're very
and
welcome, Phil.
those
A pleasure
discussions.
as always.
Thank you all for watching. That is A Girl and a Gun for this week. If you want to reach us, you can email Veronica, there's Veronica, at agirlandagun.tv. You can tweet us at agirlandagun. For now, thanks Nick, thanks for watching everybody. That's
It's
a
a
wrap.
wrap.